Mary's tough life. Mary woke up every day before the sun came up, feeling heavy-hearted and already tired from yesterday. As a single mom of 2 kids, she was the only one who could support her family. Her husband had left her years ago, leaving her alone to handle life's struggles. Her children were her biggest motivation, but they were also why she cried at night, worrying she might never be able to give them the future they deserved. Life was a constant fight, and Mary knew the battle was far from over. Working as a janitor at the local prestigious school was the only way to make ends meet, but the place was toxic. Mary was looked down on by her co-workers and especially by the teachers. They treated her with contempt, like her presence made everything dirty. "She's just the janitor," they would say, laughing and not caring if she heard them or not. On top of being judged for her social status, Mary also faced racial discrimination. Some students and parents didn't hide their dislike, making sure to treat her like she wasn't even there, or worse, like she didn't matter. One day, while cleaning a classroom, Mary heard muffled laughter from a group of teachers. They were talking about how ridiculous it was to think a janitor like her was trying to study at night. One of them mocked, "Does she think a diploma is going to change the fact that she was born to clean floors?" The words hurt Mary deeply, but she swallowed the pain, just like she did every day. She had to stay strong, she told herself, even when everything seemed like it was trying to bring her down. Every night, after a long day of work, Mary went back to her small house. She was exhausted, but her kids, who waited for her eagerly, kept her going. They needed an example of strength, and Mary was determined to be that for them. Even though she was worn out after putting the kids to bed, she sat down at the table with a dim lamp and focused on her studies. Her body begged for rest, but her mind was set on one goal: to succeed. Mary knew that most people didn't see her struggle. No one knew about the hours she spent studying at night, the aches in her body, or the silent tears she shed when she felt she might never get out of her situation. But Mary was stubborn, and giving up was never an option. Her kids wouldn't see their mom fail. She loved them more than anything, and was willing to endure any humiliation for their sake. Still, the emotional wounds were deep. The daily discrimination she faced for being a woman, poor and black, left invisible but painful scars. Mary felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Sometimes, the loneliness and disdain felt too much to handle, but she took a deep breath and found strength in her love for her kids. Deep down, she knew that if she kept fighting, one day she would win. The road ahead was uncertain, full of obstacles and challenges. But Mary knew the only way to overcome them was to keep moving forward. It didn't matter how many times they humiliated her or how many tears she cried in the dark of night. She believed that, in the end, her strength would be rewarded, and that one day she would show the world that a janitor can also succeed. The humiliations grow. Mary's days at the school were getting harder and harder. The discrimination that was already tough seemed to get worse every time she tried to advance her education. One morning, when she arrived at the school for another day of work, Mary heard a group of students laughing loudly. They had drawn rough cartoons of a black woman cleaning the floor, with offensive captions suggesting she would never be anything more than a janitor. They laughed openly in front of her without any care, while Mary kept her head down and her hands shaking, holding the cleaning bucket. The teachers, who should have stopped such behavior, just looked on with indifference. Some even gave small smiles, as if they agreed with the insults. The worst moment came when one of the most arrogant students approached Mary and, with a look of contempt, deliberately threw her lunch on the ground, spreading crumbs and dirt everywhere. "Clean this up, that's what you do best," he said with a mean laugh. Mary felt her face burn with shame. But once again, she swallowed her pride. The pain of being treated that way wasn't new, but each new humiliation left a deeper scar. The racial discrimination Mary faced was present in every part of her life at the school. Unlike other staff members who were sometimes greeted or at least acknowledged, she was treated as if she had no value at all. For many, her skin color and social status made her seem inferior, and this showed in looks of disdain, muffled laughs, and malicious whispers. No matter how much it hurt, Mary forced herself to keep going. She thought of her children with every humiliation, and that kept her from falling apart. But the emotional wounds got deeper when, on a particularly tough day, she overheard a conversation between two teachers in the hallway. "Have you heard she's trying to study at night?" "What a joke! Like a janitor like her could understand anything," one said, laughing. "She should stop dreaming and focus on doing the job she's paid for," the other added. The words echoed in Mary's mind, shaking her confidence. For the first time, she wondered if she could really keep going. Was it possible to overcome all of this? At home, her children noticed their mother's sad look. Although they didn't fully understand what was happening, they knew something was wrong. They were Mary's only source of comfort, and when she looked at them, she felt a mix of pain and hope. Everything she did, every sacrifice, was for them. They were her reason to keep going, even when everything seemed to be falling apart around her. Despite all the suffering, Mary couldn't let the pain defeat her. She knew giving up wasn't an option. Every night after the kids went to bed, she forced herself to study. With every page she turned and every exercise she finished, she reminded herself that knowledge was the only thing no one could take away from her. But the feeling that the world was against her grew heavier, and Mary felt the battle getting tougher each day. She knew she would need more than just willpower to overcome this situation. Mary was starting to realize that, besides the physical and emotional exhaustion, she was fighting against a society that seemed designed to keep her from moving forward. But even in the midst of darkness, something inside her refused to give up. She felt a sense that, somehow, she would find the strength to keep going and eventually win. Mary's dream. Despite all the humiliations, Mary had a secret she held close to her heart. She dreamed of becoming a teacher. It was a dream that seemed so far away, almost impossible to achieve, but it kept her moving forward day after day. At night, while her children slept, Mary dedicated herself to studying. It was a time of silence, but also of hope. Every word she read, every page she turned was a step toward the future she wanted to build for herself and her kids. She knew that the people around her would laugh if they knew about her ambitions. At that school, no one believed that someone like her could even imagine being anything other than a janitor. But Mary held on to her vision firmly, even when doubts sometimes crept into her heart. She pictured herself in a classroom, teaching children with the same love and care she gave her own kids. To Mary, being a teacher meant more than just a job. It was a chance to make a difference, to be respected, and finally to be seen. On one of those tough days, while cleaning the teacher's lounge, she found a piece of paper with a quote that made her stop for a moment. "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Mary held the paper tightly in her hands, as if those words were a balm for her tired soul. She put the paper in her pocket, a silent reminder that, despite everything, she still had something to fight for. But the challenges continued. Every day at school was a test of emotional strength. The racial and social discrimination she faced made the work environment even more unbearable. Some days, Mary even wondered if she should give up on her dream. The cruel words from coworkers and students echoed in her mind as if they wanted to bury her in a pit of hopelessness. It was like everyone around her wanted to convince her that she didn't have the right to dream. At home, Mary found strength in her children's eyes. They were too young to understand the sacrifices their mother was making, but the love they felt for her was enough to keep her steady. Sometimes her kids surprised her with little acts of affection that made her believe everything was worth it. "Mommy, you're the best teacher in the world," her youngest son said one day, not knowing how much those words meant to her. It was as if, in that moment, her dream was closer than ever. But despite these small moments of hope, Mary knew she would need something more. She felt alone in her struggle, and the weight of the difficulties seemed to grow heavier every day. The world around her seemed to conspire to make her give up. But inside, a soft voice kept telling her she couldn't stop. Her dream, no matter how distant it seemed, was the key to transforming her life and her children's lives. So, Mary kept going. Even when the pain of the humiliations made her doubt herself, even when physical exhaustion threatened to take over, she didn't stop. There was something bigger inside her, a flame that refused to be extinguished. With each passing day, Mary knew she was closer to a change. Even if no one believed in her, even if everyone laughed at her, she believed in herself. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The turning point. One day, something unexpected happened. Mary, as always, was cleaning an empty classroom when she noticed a conversation in the back between the school's academic coordinator and one of the teachers. They were discussing the urgent need to find a substitute teacher for a class that was left without a teacher. The coordinator seemed desperate, mentioning that there was no one available and that the situation was becoming critical. Mary continued her work in silence, but her hands began to shake with a bold idea forming in her mind. For a moment, she thought about speaking up, about offering to help. After all, she was studying to become a teacher and knew she could handle the class. But immediately, fear took over. What if they laughed? What if they humiliated her even more for suggesting something so unthinkable? But then, Mary remembered her children. All the sleepless nights she spent studying, the words she heard and endured in silence. She decided she had nothing left to lose. With her heart racing and her voice trembling, Mary approached the coordinator. "Excuse me, I know I'm nobody here, but I'm studying to become a teacher. Maybe I can help until you find someone." The silence that followed her words was devastating. The coordinator looked at her as if she had said the most ridiculous thing in the world. The teacher next to her laughed with contempt, not even trying to hide it. "You? A janitor? Please be sensible," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Mary felt her face burn, the ground seeming to disappear beneath her feet. But before she could back down, the coordinator, perhaps out of sheer lack of options, responded, "Well, we have no choice. If you really think you can handle it, give a class today. If the students don't complain, you can continue until we find someone." The tone was purely skeptical, but instead of feeling fear, Mary felt a spark of courage ignite within her. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of so much. On her way to the classroom, Mary fought against her own insecurities. Her heart pounded, and she knew this was a unique chance. She entered the room with sweaty hands, but a determined look in her eyes. The students, upon seeing her, started whispering and laughing. They only knew her as the woman who cleaned the floors. And now, she was there, in front of them, as a teacher. The first class was challenging. The students tested her limits, teasing her and trying to unsettle her. But Mary stood her ground. Every provocation was a reminder of why she was there. The class moved forward with ups and downs, but in the end, Mary felt something different. Although it was a struggle, she managed to teach the lesson. When the bell rang, some students left laughing, but others looked at her with a new kind of respect, even if it was small. At the end of the day, the coordinator looked at her with surprise. "Well, it seems they didn't complain. You can continue until we find someone." It was the most indifferent statement Mary could hear, but to her, it marked the beginning of a turning point. For the first time, she wasn't seen just as the janitor. She had taken a step forward, and no matter how small, it was the first of many. The students' support. As the weeks went by, something began to change in the classrooms where Mary taught. Her students, who initially treated her with some disdain because of her previous role as a janitor, started to notice something different about her. She wasn't just an ordinary teacher. Mary offered more than just academic knowledge. She saw her students beyond their grades, understood their struggles and pains, and that made her special. With each class, she won more and more hearts. One day, while preparing the classroom for an activity, Mary noticed a student, Emily, crying quietly at the back of the room. At the end of the class, when everyone had already left, Mary approached her with a look full of understanding. "Emily, are you okay?" Mary asked in a gentle and caring tone. Emily, with red eyes and a shaky voice, began to open up. Her father had cheated on her mother, and since the separation, her family life was falling apart. The weight of that situation was affecting her school performance and, worse, her self-esteem. Mary listened to every word attentively, without interrupting. When Emily finished, Mary held her hand and said, "I know it feels like the world is falling apart right now, but you will get through this. God is always watching over you, and I know that over time, this pain will turn into strength. What you're going through today doesn't define who you will be tomorrow." That conversation changed Emily's life, and from that day on, she began to see Mary as a mother figure within the school. The news spread among the students. They started to trust Mary not just as a teacher, but as someone who truly cared about their lives. She offered advice, listened to stories that other adults ignored, and above all, gave them hope. Gradually, Mary became many students' favorite teacher, and the classes looked forward to her lessons. However, this affection from the students contrasted with how some teachers treated her. They didn't take kindly to the success Mary was having. To them, a janitor had no place among the educators, and the fact that she was black only reinforced the prejudices they held. Mean comments frequently arose in the hallways. "She might be liked by the students, but she doesn't have the demeanor of a teacher," some said. "Someone like her should never be in the classroom." Despite all the difficulties, Mary remained steadfast in her faith. Every night, when she got home, she knelt down and prayed to God, asking for strength to continue. "Lord, I know the path is hard, but I trust in you. Help me not to give up. Help me to be strong for my kids and for those who believe in me." Her faith was unshakable, and even in the face of humiliations, she knew that God had a greater purpose for her life. The students' support, as Mary continued to face prejudice from some teachers and staff at the school, the students began to see her as much more than the janitor who became a teacher. Mary wasn't just dedicated to teaching the subjects. She also deeply cared about each student's personal well-being. One afternoon, Mary noticed a student named Sophia sitting quietly at the back of the room, her eyes red from crying. Concerned, Mary waited until the end of the class to talk to her. Sophia was hesitant at first, but she eventually opened up to Mary. Her father had cheated on her mother, leading to the family's separation. The pain of seeing her parents split apart left her feeling lost, not knowing how to handle the anger and sadness she was carrying. Mary, with her gentle and compassionate voice, listened patiently without judging. She knew that, beyond teaching math or English, her role as a teacher also involved being an emotional support for her students. "I know it's hard, Sophia, but you're stronger than you think. Sometimes things feel out of control, but that doesn't define who you are. And I'm here if you need help," Mary said, holding Sophia's hands and conveying a calm that the girl desperately needed. Hearing these words, Sophia felt something inside her change. For the first time, she felt she had someone she could turn to, someone who truly cared. From that moment on, Mary's relationship with her students deepened even more. The young people began to admire her, not just as a teacher, but as a trusted figure. Gradually, they started sharing their personal problems with her, and Mary always welcomed them with words of comfort and faith. She prayed every night, asking God to give her the wisdom not only to be a good teacher, but also to be a light in her students' lives. However, while the students showed increasing affection for Mary, some teachers didn't see her kindness in the same light. Instead, the prejudice against her seemed to grow. "She might be good with the kids, but she doesn't have the demeanor of a real teacher," muttered one of the most influential teachers, mixing disdain with envy. Other colleagues agreed, not hiding the fact that Mary being a janitor and black influenced their opinions. These mean comments began to weigh on Mary, who, despite her success with the students, felt the weight of racism and prejudice in the workplace. She would retreat to pray, asking God for strength and wisdom to face the challenges. Her faith was the rock that kept her steady, even when everything seemed against her. "Lord, I know the path is hard, but I trust in you. Help me to keep going and not to give up," she prayed every night, seeking the strength to endure the humiliations. Despite everything, Mary continued to give her best. She knew her mission there was much bigger than the barriers set by those who despised her. Her students were growing, learning, and that was what truly mattered. But she also knew that a new battle was about to begin, and she would need all her faith to overcome it. Hidden prejudice. As Mary became increasingly beloved by the students, the atmosphere among the teachers remained hostile. No matter how hard she tried, some of her colleagues saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong there, especially because she was a former janitor and because of her skin color. Caroline, the academic coordinator, led the group of those who didn't accept Mary's rise. At every meeting or casual encounter in the hallways, Caroline's look of disdain was like an invisible knife. "She'll never be a real teacher," Caroline openly commented to other teachers. "They might pretend she has talent, but we all know she lacks the demeanor and class to lead a classroom." These comments echoed through the school hallways, creating increasing tension for Mary. Although her students loved her, she knew she was still looked down upon by many of her colleagues. One morning, while preparing an activity for her students, Mary heard muffled laughter in the teacher's lounge. She hesitated to enter but needed to grab some materials, so she took a deep breath and opened the door. As soon as she stepped in, the laughter stopped and everyone looked at her. Caroline, not missing the chance, said with a sarcastic smile, "Mary, dear, why don't you go back to what you do best? Cleaning these tables." The room erupted in laughter, and Mary felt her face flush, but she remained calm. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Despite appearing strong, Mary's heart felt heavy. Every cruel comment wounded her deeply, and she began to question if she could endure so much prejudice and disdain. That evening, when she got home, Mary knelt down and prayed. God, I know you're with me, but I feel my heart heavy. Please give me the strength to keep going. I can't give up now. Tears streamed down her face as she poured her heart out in prayer, asking God for the courage to move forward. The next day, something unexpected happened. During one of her classes, Sophia, the student Mary had helped with her family issues, raised her hand and asked to speak to the class. With a shaky voice, she said, "I know that Teacher Mary isn't like the other teachers. She's better. She really cares about us. When I was going through a tough time at home, she helped me like no one else would. I want you all to know that we're lucky to have her as our teacher." The room fell silent, and many of the students, who already admired Mary, began to applaud. Mary tried to hold back her tears but couldn't. That gesture, coming from Sophia and the students, was confirmation that her work was making a difference. They saw her not as the former janitor, but as a teacher and someone who genuinely cared about them. That moment strengthened Mary. She knew that the battle against prejudice was far from over, but she now had something that couldn't be taken away from her: the respect and affection of her students. Even if her colleagues continued to despise her, Mary understood that she was fulfilling her mission. And above all, she knew that God was with her, guiding each of her steps. Faith that moves mountains. After the emotional support from her students, Mary felt she had found a new purpose at the school. Despite the humiliations and prejudice she faced daily, she knew she was there for a greater reason. Her students didn't just see her as a teacher, they saw someone who understood them, someone who cared about their pains and struggles. That alone was a huge victory. But the weight of the constant humiliations from the teachers was still present, and Mary knew she would need something bigger to overcome it all. One day, after a tough meeting with Caroline, the academic coordinator, where she was ridiculed once again for her past as a janitor, Mary felt she was at her breaking point. She left the school with her head down, feeling that all her efforts might not be worth it. The prejudice seemed like an impossible barrier to overcome. But when she got home and saw the faces of her children, Peter and Anna, something inside her changed. Peter, her oldest son, looked at her with unwavering confidence. "Mom, I know you can do this. You always told us to never give up, so you can't give up now either." Her son's words echoed in her mind like a deep truth. Mary knew that giving up was not an option. She had come too far to let prejudice defeat her. That night, Mary prayed like never before. She knelt beside the bed and, with tears in her eyes, asked God for strength. "Lord, I know I'm here for a reason. Even if people try to bring me down, I trust in you. Please help me overcome this struggle, to find a way when it seems there's no path. I can't do this alone." Mary's prayer was a moment of renewal for her faith. She stood up from that moment stronger than ever, feeling that God was by her side every step of the way. The next day, when she entered the school, something felt different. Although the teacher's hostility hadn't disappeared, Mary felt an inner peace that protected her. She began to focus even more on her students, and her performance as a teacher caught the attention of some members of the administration who started to notice the positive impact she was having at the school. Even so, Caroline didn't give up. Determined to see Mary fail, the coordinator began pressuring the directors to review her position as a substitute teacher. But Mary, strengthened by her faith and the love of her children and students, was ready to face any challenge that came her way. She knew she wasn't alone. As rumors about a possible dismissal circulated around the school, Mary maintained her unwavering faith. She knew that prejudice was still a painful reality, But now she was certain that her journey hadn't been in vain. Every time she looked at her students, she saw the future she was helping to shape. And that was enough to keep her strong. The big decision. As time went on, Mary continued to win the hearts of her students and even some parents, who began to see her as a dedicated and empathetic teacher. However, the prejudice from her colleagues remained strong. Caroline, who didn't give up trying to bring Mary down, kept pressuring the administration, insisting that the school needed someone more qualified to fill the substitute teacher position. For Caroline and some other teachers, Mary's past as a janitor and her skin color were insurmountable barriers. Tensions rose when Caroline, in a final attempt to remove Mary from the school, called a special meeting with the administration. The goal was to discuss Mary's future and decide whether she should continue teaching. The news of the meeting quickly spread throughout the school, and many teachers were convinced it would mark the end of Mary's journey there. However, something unexpected happened. When the students learned about the meeting, they decided to act. Sophia, the student Mary had helped with family problems, led a movement among her classmates. Together, they wrote a letter to the administration, explaining the impact Mary had had on their lives. They didn't see her just as a substitute teacher. They saw someone who taught them with her heart, someone who was there for them when they needed it most. Mary isn't just a teacher. She's someone who inspires us and makes us believe we can be better, the letter said. The students knew that without their support, Mary could lose her job, and that was something they weren't willing to accept. On the day of the meeting, while Mary anxiously awaited the outcome, something incredible happened. The students, led by Sophia, appeared at the administration's office door with the letter in their hands. They asked to be heard and handed the document directly to the president of the administration. "If you take Teacher Mary away from us, you're removing someone who teaches us more than just school subjects. You're removing someone who teaches us to be better people," Sophia said with tears in her eyes. The administration, which until that moment was leaning towards following Caroline's recommendations, was visibly moved by the students' words. The president asked for time to read the letter and listen to what they had to say. Meanwhile, Mary, unaware of what was happening, prayed silently. "Lord, I know I'm in your hands. Whatever the decision, I trust that you have a plan for me." When the administration returned to the room, the atmosphere was different. The president, with a discreet smile, looked at Mary and said, "We received a very strong testimony from your students, and it's clear that your impact here goes far beyond what we imagined. We have decided that you will continue as a teacher and, moreover, we want you to participate in new projects that will benefit our students even more." Mary, emotional, felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She had won, not by confronting her coworkers or by succumbing to pressures, but because her students saw her for who she really was, an inspiration. As Caroline left the meeting frustrated and defeated, Mary stood firm, knowing that this battle had been won with faith, love, and the dedication she had always shown her students. Mary's victory. After the administration's decision, Mary's life at the school began to change drastically. Although prejudice was still present in some looks and subtle comments, the support from her students and the official recognition from the administration gave her new strength. Mary now walked through the hallways with her head held high, knowing that despite all the humiliations and challenges, she had won. Her faith, dedication, and love for her students had prevailed. The students, in turn, felt proud to have stood up for Mary. They knew that without their intervention, the school might have lost one of the best teachers they had ever had. The relationship between Mary and her students grew even stronger, and with each class, she not only taught the subjects, but also shared valuable life lessons. Mary inspired them to never give up, to face their own difficulties with courage and determination, just as she had done. Over time, Mary's impact on the school became impossible to ignore. She began to be invited to participate in special projects, help coordinate school activities, and even mentor other teachers on how to handle students facing personal challenges. Her ability to understand the emotional and social needs of her students made her a unique and indispensable teacher. At home, her children, Peter and Anna, looked up to her with admiration. They knew how much their mother had fought to get where she was. Peter, especially, felt proud to have a mother who never gave up, even when the world seemed against her. "Mom, you're proof that faith and hard work can change everything," he said one day as he hugged her. Those words warmed Mary's heart, knowing she had succeeded not only for herself, but also for her children, who were always her greatest motivation. As for Caroline, the coordinator who had tried so hard to bring Mary down, her influence at the school began to wane. Over time, it became clear that her prejudiced attitudes had no place there anymore. She was transferred to another branch, and although she never apologized, her absence brought relief to Mary and many others at the school. At a special end-of-year event, Mary was called to the stage by the administration to receive an award in recognition of her contribution to the school and her students. As she stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Her students, with tears in their eyes, stood and clapped, showing how much she meant to them. Mary, moved, held the microphone, and, with a steady voice, said, "I wouldn't be here without the faith that sustained me and my students, who taught me as much as I taught them. This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who believes that with effort and faith, we can overcome any obstacle." Mary's victory wasn't just about securing a position or receiving recognition. It was about overcoming years of humiliation, discrimination, and challenges that tried to bring her down. Mary had proven to everyone, and most importantly, to herself, that a janitor, a black woman, a single mother can indeed succeed in a world that so often tries to say otherwise. At the end of that event, Mary returned home with a light heart and the certainty that her journey was just beginning. She knew her mission at the school wasn't just to teach, but also to inspire, guide, and be a living example of overcoming, faith, and resilience. God had heard her prayers, and now she was reaping the rewards of everything she had planted with so much love and dedication.